Hey guys, it's Craig here. Thank you for being here. Welcome to this very important installment of Homebrew Wednesday. Although at this particular moment it's not Wednesday, I know. I'm sorry about that. Life goes on. Cheers. This is a Pilsner that I picked up from my local liquor store. It's not a bad beer. Unfortunately, this very moment I have no homebrew ready to drink just yet. So this is all I've got. Cheers. Okay, judging by last week's comments, some of them, a few of them anyway, on my Homebrew Wednesday video, there might be a little bit of confusion out there in regard to steeping, mashing, and some different grains that we use. So I'm going to take you through all of this confusion and iron it all out so that it makes sense to you. I want to demystify mashing, steeping, specialty grains, base grains. Let's do it. Now, I've been reading John Palmer's book, How to Brew. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I have read the sections that are pertinent to this topic. And I've also done quite a bit of reading online. So if you have any concerns about what I'm about to tell you, then you probably need to go and do some of your own research, okay? Because I've done it, and I think I have it down. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of chemical and, molecular things here. I just want to make sure that you understand it in as simply as possible. If you want to go further with it and understand the inner workings of everything, then you're welcome to do that. Okay? So, talk about grains and what grains, what they do to the grains to allow us to use them for making beer. When grains come off the, out of the fields, you can't make beer out of them. They're not ready yet. There's no potential for them to be able to be made into beer. There has to be a procedure. They have to be prepared. They have to be set up, basically, in order for us to use them to make beer. That's called malting. Okay, so basically what malting, and you can read all about malting and all the details and different, basically what it is they take the grains and they bathe them, they soak them in warm water to allow them to start to sprout, okay, start to germinate. And when germination occurs, inside the grain, there's a little ball of starch, okay? Now, when the germination starts to occur, there's an enzyme called amylase. There's lots of enzymes in these grains, but the one we're interested in the most is called amylase. The amylase enzyme is what is responsible for converting the starch into sugar. Now, you have to imagine, you're taking this barley, which is basically seeds. I don't have any with me right now, but they're little seeds, right? And if you plant them, you're going to grow a barley plant, right? So when you put that seed in the ground, it soaks the moisture from the soil, perhaps even the warmth from the sun, in the soil, and the nutrients from the soil, and then it starts to grow. So there's got to be something inside that seed that knows what to do, or that has the energy to pull up its own bootstraps and start to create a plant, a barley plant. And that is the amylase enzyme that is in there. And that is the enzyme that is inside the seed. It starts to convert the starch into sugar, and the sugar is the energy that the plant needs to start to grow. Of course, once it gets above ground, it's got leaves, and then the sun, photosynthesis, the whole bit, right? So what we're doing when we're malting the barley is we're simulating that process of getting the seed ready to grow, right? But as soon as we get to that point, we stop it, we halt it. And the way you do that is you take the grains out and you dry them. You basically heat them up and dry them out, and that puts it to sleep and stops it right before the enzymes start converting the starches to sugars. Now it's called malted barley, and now it's ready for you and me to make into beer. All right? So What you do is we take the malted barley, we put it in some hot water, we soak it in hot water at a certain temperature, and the procedure of germination, of converting from starch to sugars, starts up again. Of course, it happens a lot quicker because before you put the grains in the water, you're going to grind them up and crack the husks, exposing the inside of the grain, which is, by the way, called endosperm. That little white part inside is called endosperm. So you're exposing it all, and the enzymes are there, and they're going, oh, look at all this starch. This is awesome. Let's do this. Come on. And they do their little thing, and they can, within an hour, they've got those starches converted into sugars. That's a mash. Okay? That is a mash. You are not steeping grains there. The act of converting the starches into sugars is called a mash. And of course, then you separate the grains from the water that you've created there. The water now has all the sugars in it, and the color and the flavor, and you do the whole lautering and sparging to get those grains cleaned off. So what you're left with is a nice batch of malt extract. Really, is what that is now. What you've got is the stuff that's going to make the beer. When you boil that up with some hops, you add the yeast, ferment it, and you've got a simple beer. Okay, so that is malted barley. Those grains that you do that with are called base grains or base malts, because they're the base of most beers. That's where, most, if not all, of your alcohol is going to come from, and that's what's going to make it into beer. All right? Now, beer would be pretty boring if it was just made of base malts. Kind of like this, right? This isn't a bad beer, but it's kind of plain, boring, nothing special about it. So, that's why we've got something called specialty grains. Sort of a different category of grains. They're made of the same thing, malted barley. All right, but what the maltsters do is when they malt the barley and they dry it out and stop the process of malting. They stop the grains so they're like all revved up, no place to go, ready for you. Then what they do is they raise the temperature of the kiln, of the oven where they're roasting it, and they start to roast the grains, and the grains get darker and darker and darker, depending on how long and the temperature, of the roast. All right. So this is why we've got all these different grains, that have different colors, and chocolate malt and brown malt and black patent and golden this, and I don't know all the names. I don't have any notes in front of me. I'm just doing this from my memory. So all these different names of all these different grains are really just different amounts of roasting, because there's all these different brand names and things and funny names they give them. All it really is different temperatures and different lengths of time that the grain has been roasted. Okay, this is where we're talking specialty grains now. We're not talking the base malts. The base malts, all they did was germinate them, stop the germination when it was ready to go, give them to you. You've got them, and you're gonna do a mash. The specialty grains have been further roasted beyond what the base malts were. All right, and for that reason, these grains lose their ability to be converted from starch to sugars. The enzyme, the amylase enzyme, gets destroyed. It gets basically, ruined, killed, if you will, or it's inert. Okay, it now will not do any conversions. Right? So now what you've got are grains which have been malted, but there's no enzyme in there to do a conversion. Does that sound kind of sad? No, because these grains add color and flavor to your beer. So what you would do is you've got your base malts here, which are all ready to go and get converted and do all their thing. Then you've got your specialty grains over here, which have character and flavor and color and you're going to mix those with the base malts in your mash. All right? Then you're going to get a beer that's got a lot of character to it, a lot of flavor, a lot of color. Even the darker, they can do it until the stuff is black. They can roast it until it's black. That's where you got your chocolate malts, your black, your very, very dark malts. A lot of flavor, a lot of coffee, smoky, chocolatey flavors in those grains, right? And, there's different amounts. So you've got these different colors of grains. So what you would normally do is you would add a little bit of these grains in with your base malts, your base grains, just to give some color and flavor. Now, when you're doing a mash, you have to make sure that you've got what's called diastatic power. You've got to have enough diastatic power to do the starch conversion. Now, the base malts have a lot of diastatic power. They've got a lot of potential to convert the starches to sugars in the mash, right? So, boom, you're rocking. These specialty grains do not have a lot of, if any, diastatic power. So you need to be careful you don't add too many of these to your mash, otherwise your overall diastatic power will be low and you might have to do a longer mash, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever. So, there are recipes out there that have certain ratios of base grains versus specialty grains, and most good recipes out there have a good balance between the two. Okay, so why then, if you take these specialty grains and which have no diastatic power, they cannot be converted from starch to sugar by themselves, and that's key. By themselves, they can't do that because they don't have the enzyme to do it. If you put those in hot water, why isn't that a mash? It's not a mash because there's no starch conversion going on, right? They're just soaking and kind of sitting there and leaving off their flavors and color, but there's no chemical reactions going on at all. That is not a mash. You are steeping these grains in warm water, and that's all you're doing. So that's the difference between a mash and a steep, right? When you're mashing, you're converting. When you're steeping, you're not. All right? Like, even if you add the specialty grains to the base malts, you're still converting because the base malts have the enzymes to do the conversion from starch to sugar, right? I hope this is making some sense to you guys, all right? So as long as there's conversion going on, it's a mash. And yes, you can do a mash in a bag, dip it in hot water, and it's kind of like steeping grains, but if there's conversion going on in there, then it's a mash. You are mashing. Now that's the difference between the two. Okay? So I hope that clears it up. Now, of course, you wouldn't really want to do that because it's not a very efficient way to mash grains all crammed up inside of a bag. You really would like to have them free floating in your hot water so that you can stir them and they can be freely, sort of loosely floating around. You don't want it too loose. You don't want it too tight. There's different ratios, but the rule of thumb, basically, when you're doing a mash, is 1.25 quarts of water per pound of grain. Okay, and that's not metric, but you can do the conversion on your own for that. All right, 1.25 quarts of water per pound of grain, and it's give or take. The other thing about mashing versus steeping is that mashing has to be done at very specific temperature, about 150 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take a few, right? Whereas steeping grains, it doesn't matter because you're not doing something really sensitive like converting starches to sugars. Those enzymes are very sensitive. You do it at too high a temperature, they won't work as well as efficiently. You do it at too low a temperature, they won't work. There's a window of efficiency there that you need to stay within when you're doing your mash, where the enzymes are going to do their best job, All right. When you're steeping grains, it doesn't matter. There's no enzymes to be concerned about. You're just getting the flavors out. So anywhere between 150 and 170 degrees when you're steeping specialty grains is fine. Now, a question that I get asked is this. What if the grains, the specialty grains, have only been roasted a little bit? So they're just a little bit dark. How much diastatic power do they have? Well, that's a good question. And yes, they can have some diastatic power. The ones that were only roasted slightly, just to give them a tiny bit of color and character, still may have some diastatic power, and that may add to the total diastatic power of your mash if you put those in with your base malts. Okay? But the darker the grains get roasted, the less diastatic power they'll have, until you get down to the really, really dark ones, and they don't have any at all. None. Okay? So, you know, that's something that I don't think a lot of people realize. But the diastatic power that these slightly roasted grains have is slightly less. Sorry, is less than half of what the base malts do. So you wouldn't really want to do an entire mash with these lightly roasted specialty grains. Even though they have some diastatic power, I don't know if it's enough to do a complete mash. Okay? Right, so there's a third type of grain, which I should mention, and that's called crystal. Crystal malt or Cara malt. Anything with Cara, like Cara Pils, Cara Munich, those things are all Cara malts, crystal malts, basically sort of the same thing. And here's why they're different than the other two. What they do is, instead of stopping the germination process like they do with the base malts, they let it continue a little further. And so inside the little seed, the amylase enzyme starts to work on the starch inside the seed and starts to convert it to sugar, which is what's supposed to happen, right? So once that's converted to sugar, then they roast the malt. And they heat up the oven and they roast the malt. And what that does is it caramelizes or crystallizes the sugar that's inside the seed. Once they cool that seed down, that bit of sugar that got created is now crystallized. And that's why it's called crystal malt or Cara malt. Cara for caramelize, crystal for crystallize. Kind of the same thing. All right. These malts they don't have any diastatic power at all. Okay. But there is some sugar in there that could be fermentable. The darker the crystal malt, the less fermentable its sugar will be. So you add a crystal 60 malt to your mash. It's going to give its sweetness into the mash, right? But the sweetness, the sugar that grain has is not fermentable because it's been, I think the term is inverted, but I'm not sure. Inverted sugar. Correct me if I'm wrong, okay? It's a sugar that's not fermentable, and it will remain in the beer after fermentation is finished. Now, that's why you have to sort of be careful how much crystal malt you add to your recipe, because if you add too much, it's going to be a really sweet beer. Okay? There's crystal 10, there's crystal 20, 40, 60, all the way up to 120. And the 120 crystal is very dark. It's going to have a lot of sweetness. It's going to have a lot of character, a lot of biscuitiness and goodness to it. So those are the choices you've got. Okay? So I hope I haven't confused you further. But if I have, I've got links down below, okay, that you can go and watch, and that will, not only confirm what I've just told you, but maybe help you understand it a little bit better. Because I promise you, once you have this concept in your head, you will completely understand what mashing is, what steeping is, and what the different types of grains are for. And if you're wanting to get into all grain brewing or mini mashes or partial extracts or steeping or anything like that, you're going to want to be speaking the same language as the rest of us. Okay? So I hope that helps, guys. Cheers. Just to conclude, by popular demand, yes, absolutely, I will be making a jerky video, beef jerky video. I already have the meat in my fridge. It's a different meat than I used before, but I'll show you how to do it. It doesn't matter. So absolutely we'll be doing that. Very popular, by very popular demand. Also the pickle video as well. It got delayed because my cucumbers started to go a bit soft, so I had to throw them away or use them for something else. So that's up and coming as well. So 2 Craig's Kitchen videos coming up very soon. Okay? And that's it for me. I'm out of here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was informative for you. If you want to buy a CraigTube t-shirt, I would love it if you did. It's tgtshirt.com. My live broadcast is on Friday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's carbonated. What are you going to do? 10 p.m. Eastern on Friday nights. And for updates on what's going on with me and why things are late or whatever, my website is craigfaraway.com, and my Facebook page, well, you just look me up on Facebook. Lots of people have. I'm not hard to find on there, so you're welcome to subscribe to me on there as well. And I will personally accept your friend request. All right, it's Craig Faraway on Facebook. I have another Facebook account which I don't accept public friend requests on, but the Craig Faraway one I do, and I actually do personally accept the friend requests myself. I don't have somebody else doing it for me. And I do look at your picture and everything and see your name and stuff. And so, it is me accepting those, and I appreciate all your support. All right. I think that's all I've got. I think. I don't know how long this video ended up being, but I tried to compact it into the best I could. And again, if you're confused, links down below to give it more clarity, because I just did this from the seat of my pants. I don't know. I try my best. I understand it, but trying to put it into words in 20 minutes or less is not always easy. So once you understand this, you'll feel so much more confident in what you're doing when you're working with grains, because you'll know what you're doing, basically. Of course, none of us really do know what we're doing, do we? To a certain extent. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I'm out of beer. Cheers. Thanks for watching. Hope you are safe and hope you have a good weekend. 17.